You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Good to see you. I am going to start my topic this week with one of my favorite stories.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah. Probably you've heard some part of this, or maybe all of it before. Ernest Shackleton and his crew of 27 men had already endured a lot.
It sounds so familiar.
Nice pun, by the way.
Yes. See what I did there? Their aim had been to make the first crossing of the Antarctic continent, but their ship, the Endurance. Yes. It had become, unfortunately, caught in pack ice in the Weddell Sea. Yeah, in December 2014. 1914. Excuse me, 1914.
2014. We are just getting to the
Who could
Antarctic
forget
Circle.
when Ernest Shackleton was trapped at the South Pole in 2014?
For the first time.
So the ship drifted with the ice for months until it was finally crushed in October 1915, and they abandoned ship. Then they camped on the ice. They were gradually shooting and eating their sled dogs until April 1916.
Yep.
Horrible.
And finally, the northward drift of the ice brought them to open water, which was near the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. They then took to the Endurance's 3 lifeboats and rowed and sailed the stormy waters to Elephant Island, which is a godforsaken bit of rock that's about 245 kilometers northeast of the tip of the peninsula.
It's not much better than being trapped in an ice floe.
Not a lot. There were, however, there was fresh water. There was seals and penguins that they could use for food and fuel. So there was that. And after resting and recuperating
maybe a little
bit,
warmer.
Yeah. A little bit, but the beach
much.
that they were on was getting like raked by storms, and it was pretty horrible.
Oh.
So it was now May 1916. The Antarctic winter was coming on. As I mentioned, they had fresh water and some food, as well as, they had all these supplies that they had brought with them that were intended for crossing the continent, but now they were using to survive. But at any rate, this was not a place where ships pretty much ever came, and so there was basically zero chance that they would be rescued if they stayed there. So Shackleton, as the leader of the expedition, decided that their best chance of surviving was he took 5 men with him in one of the lifeboats, which they kind of retrofitted to be a little sturdier. And the plan was to sail 1,300 kilometers, that's about 810 miles, to South Georgia Island, where there was a whaling station.
Yeah. In essentially a lifeboat.
In a lifeboat, yeah. I would happily talk more about this. It's such an amazing survival story. But this 17-day voyage, which incredibly ended in success and the eventual rescue and survival of all of the 28 original crew of the Endurance.
Amazing.
Yeah. But actually, I told this story as an introduction to the body of water that the 6 men had to cross to reach South Georgia Island, which is called the Drake Passage. So the Drake Passage is the narrowest passage around Antarctica. So it's about 800 kilometers from the southern tip of South America to the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. And it is notorious for having arguably, the roughest seas on the planet.
Not great.
That makes sense. There's a reason why there's a Panama Canal now.
Indeed.
Multiple. But anyway.
So there's a few reasons why it's so dangerous. It's where the Atlantic and Pacific and Southern Oceans meet, which means that there are different ocean currents, wave patterns, and winds that all converge there. And in addition, if you circle globe at the latitude of the Drake Passage, which is it's between 55 and 75 degrees south, approximately, there is no large landmass there that interrupts the flow of water and wind. So
Right.
the wind is westerly, and it just keeps going, and it builds up those waves. And
There's nothing to stop it.
There's nothing to stop
Sure
it.
would be nice to have some storm oil, huh?
It would be. I was thinking when you were doing this topic last week, I was thinking, if only I'd been doing this topic last
So
week.
close.
The passage is also very deep. It has an average depth of 3,400 meters, which is about 11,000 feet, which is only a little less deep than the average depth of the Atlantic Ocean. So it's deep.
Oof.
Just a tinge.
All of this adds up to frequently stormy seas with huge waves of up to 12 meters, or about 40 feet.
No.
Nope. Nope.
Nightmare conditions if you're trying to travel in a converted lifeboat. And it has also posed many problems for other ships as well, especially before the opening of the Panama Canal, as you mentioned, Rachel, in 1914. There were few choices for crossing between the Atlantic and Pacific. There's the Strait of Magellan and the Beagle Channel, but those are inland waterways. They kind of thread between the mainland tip of South America and some islands of Tierra del Fuego.
Right.
And because there are strong and unpredictable winds, there's always the risk of being blown aground, basically. So
That's
if you
not
don't
good.
navigate extremely carefully, or if your luck is bad, you could be in really big trouble. So most ships actually went through the Drake Passage. It was also called rounding the Horn, if you've ever heard that in the old-timey
Yes.
books or whatever. And it's called that because of Cape Horn is the name of the southernmost point of Tierra del Fuego. Because it's shaped like a horn, I think.
There you go. You got it.
There it is.
Interestingly, it's, as I mentioned, the winds are westerly there, and it makes extremely difficult sailing for ships in the Drake Passage traveling from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And sometimes ships
Kind of
even
going the opposite direction you want.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sometimes ships even had to turn back. Famously, the HMS Bounty, which, if you've heard of Mutiny on the Bounty, that ship, they were trying to get to Tahiti going west, but they actually wound up having to turn around and go east the long way around, which I think didn't make the crew any fonder of the captain.
No, it did
No.
not.
But aside from all this human drama, the Drake Passage is also hugely important to world ocean and climate patterns. So the shape and the depth of the Drake Passage have a big influence on the Antarctic circumpolar current, which it's a deep water current, and it makes a complete circuit of the Antarctic continent, and it's driven by those westerly winds at those latitudes. And this is actually the strongest current on Earth by a lot of measures. And it's it's kind of one of the main drivers of other global ocean current patterns. And there's basically what is sometimes called a conveyor belt, a sort of worldwide conveyor belt of ocean currents, and it circulates through the major oceans and drives the exchange of nutrients and gases and life forms and various other things. So this Antarctic circumpolar current just circles the continent, and it's the only current that connects the Indian, the Pacific, and the Atlantic Oceans, and it's the only one that fully circles the globe. So it's very important. And since the Drake Passage is the narrowest point that it has to flow through, it's very strong there. In fact, the amount of water that flows through the Drake Passage is more than 150 times the volume of all the rivers in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lot.
Okay. Sure.
It is a lot. And another important thing about the Antarctic circumpolar current is, for reasons that are a little too complex to explain here, basically the current combined with temperature and salinity gradients that are due to latitude They combine to keep Antarctica relatively cold. So like more cold than you would otherwise expect in some ways. And
Okay.
yeah. So it's believed that when the Drake Passage opened, which was somewhere between 17 and 49 million years ago, it led to that current being established and Antarctica cooling down more than it had been.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense, though.
Yeah. So climate change is now messing with it, of course. It's apparently speeding the current up. And
Oh, really?
yeah, for some complicated
Horrifying.
reasons, it may actually increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because it's bringing deep water up that has a lot of carbon dioxide in it, and
Right.
it'll off gas.
Right.
Yeah. So on that, I feel like I often end my episodes on like some
That-
depressing environmental note.
Wah, wah.
On that sad note.
Yeah. I did rely on a bunch of different sources today, but I want to in particular call out a really great book about Shackleton's voyage. It's called Endurance by Alfred Lansing. It's a classic. Really good read if you're
Nice.
interested in that. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, Kirk will have something for us.
Cool. Thanks, Victoria. Kirk, let's go.
Hey, you, yes, you. Don't skip ahead. I know your finger was hovering right over that skip button because you're thinking, they're going to tell me about the Society of Strange. Well, look, I actually just wanted this week say thank you to all of our amazing patrons who have made this show possible. We could not do it without you. Doing a podcast is not free. We have equipment costs, we have hosting costs to make the show available, and the members of the Society of Strange are the ones that make that possible. So thank you. We appreciate you so much. If you want to join our little club and help us to continue to do what we do, head over to patreon.com/strangebynature. I'm going to send things right back to the show.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. This week, I am diving deep into my secret hoard of topics. To dredge one up, I've been meaning to get to for a while. I was actually inspired by Rachel's topic, for the past 2 weeks here, about all the colorful animals. And specifically, when you brought up the peacock mantis shrimp, I was like, oh,
Of course.
now is the time to talk about an aquatic creature as well. So
Yes.
it's at least a little bit colorful, and it does indeed live in, Rachel, one of your favorite places, not Australia, but the ocean.
The ocean.
I thought at first you said it lives in Rachel.
I hope not.
No, it does not.
Really hope. I mean,
No.
that's extra funny when you learn what my topic is.
Just Kirk's face. None of you can obviously see it, but he's about ready to leave the room.
I wasn't going to come right out and say it, but we're talking about crabs. Yeah.
For the record, crabs do not live inside of me.
Okay, great.
Glad to hear it.
Statement I didn't think I had to say ever.
That's where we've come. That's what the show has come
Crabs
to.
do not live
All right.
inside of Rachel. Episode title right there.
All right. So the creature I'm talking about this week is actually a whole genus of creatures that goes by the name of Libia. And I often find it kind of interesting to think about like where these genus names come from. Like, do they mean something? And I looked and I looked and I looked on this one, and I just could not find any reference to what Libia means and why they picked that genus, which is really too bad. One of the things that really bugs me about, all these scientific names for creatures is like they have these amazing names and there's never any explanation anywhere as to why they went with that name.
It's
Unless you're
probably deep in the archives
There.
of some natural history museum somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure it is, but it's I want a book that just lists every species in the world and what their name means. Is that asking for too much?
Maybe.
Yes, probably. So anyways, this week I'm talking about boxer crabs.
Ooh.
And this name is actually a common name that applies to all members of the Libia genus. So there's actually about 10 different species that are in this genus, and they all go by the same common name. So they're all boxing crabs or boxer crabs or pom-pom crabs, which is very cute.
That's so cute.
The distinctive and strange feature of these crabs is that they don't have large claws like we would typically associate with crabs. And that was probably one of the first things you pictured when I said crab was like the big,
like one big
pinchy,
large claw and another one that's kind of smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't have those. And what they have is essentially like a slender finger with like 8 or 9 tiny little claws or hooks kind of on the end. And they use this unique appendage to pick up sea anemone and use them for boxing gloves. Thus their name.
That sounds amazing.
Crab.
They pick up sea anemone and just
hold them in their hands and just punch it out.
That's awesome.
I mean, that would work. That's awesome.
So this is actually an example of mutualism. So both species benefit from the arrangement. The crabs obviously benefit as they get to carry around painful, stinging pom-poms, right? So
they're the cheerleaders of the ocean.
Yeah, except they're using them for defense. Defense. And if anything's trying to attack them, they can just like pow, as they start boxing them and stinging them with these anemone that are on their hands, which is just wild. And the anemone are actually thought to benefit as well because they're gaining mobility. They're being carried around. It probably gives them access to food that they may not otherwise come into contact with, and possibly even one research apparently was showing that they get greater oxygenation. I don't know if it's because they're being waved around in the water or what, but they are getting more oxygen. So I think there's some interesting trade-offs, though, that it's not necessarily all necessarily positive stuff. So one of those has to do with size. Now, I tend to think of sea anemones as being like fairly good size, like a, I don't know, orange or grapefruit kind of size is like what I picture when I think of one. I'm probably thinking of the
you don't think of
kind of showy ones.
Exactly. Not the little tiny ones that are everywhere.
Boxer crabs are pretty small.
Oh.
One of the better known species that's been researched a bunch is actually only about an inch wide.
Oh,
in its actual body. Yeah, its body. So I mean, its legs stick out more than that, but you know, it's only its body's an inch wide, and that's actually one of the big boxer crabs. I couldn't find really good size information on all 10 different species, but the ones I could find, a lot of them were only a half inch in size.
So small.
So they're just teeny. So you got to picture the sea anemone. They're not carrying around big old like grapefruit sized pom-poms. They're carrying around some very tiny anemones. So the crabs actually don't want too big of an anemone on their hands, and so they actually control how much food the anemone have access to, and they can therefore control how large they're going to get. So they basically keep them small anemone. By restrict. Yeah, I did see it described as that. I mean, which is not and I, as someone who has done bonsai, like I actually kind of object to that comparison because people think you're like starving the plants, and actually if you starve them, they die. It has more to do with, I could do as a whole topic one day of how you actually keep those trees small. But
sounds like Patreon episode.
They are miniature in the same sense that bonsai trees are miniature. So that is sort of a trade-off that the anemone is getting. They're not going to grow up to be as big as they maybe could otherwise. And one of the drawbacks for the crabs is that where their claws should be, they have stinging anemone. So as you can imagine, this makes catching food with their claws difficult. I mean, they really can't. So instead, they actually use the anemone to catch the food, and then they have other appendages that they use to like take the food away from the anemone and eat it. So they're like using it to, I don't know, to like sting things or whatever, but they're kind of like hunting around with those pom-poms and then pulling food out of them.
So how exactly are they holding on to the anemone again?
So they've got those like 8 or 9 little kind of hooks at the end of their appendage, and they're sort of clasping onto it.
Okay.
So research has shown that the crabs play actually a pretty important role in propagation of new anemone, and it's pretty fascinating. So let me just describe this experiment some researchers did. The researchers collected crabs from the Red Sea, and all of them already had their own anemone, their little pom-poms, right? So they put them into aquariums, and they took one anemone away from each crab, so each one of them is now only holding one. And you might think, oh, maybe they're going to like fight over them or something, like what's going to happen.
Right.
Well, all the crabs each cut their remaining anemone in half and then put one half in each,
Of course they did.
Little claw.
hand, essentially. And because they're very small and they can regenerate, within just a few days, everyone had 2 anemone again.
That's great.
That's so
Which-
cool.
Is super cool. And in another experiment, they put 2 anemone together in an aquarium, 2 boxer crabs in an aquarium together, and then they took both anemone away from one of them. And what they observed was that the 2 crabs would then fight until they both had one, and then once they both had one, they'd stop fighting, and they would again cut it in half, hold one in each hand, and within days, they have regenerated, and they both had full pom-poms again.
Huh.
So very cool. It's all very interesting. But what animals do in the lab can be different than what actually happens in the wild. So
Yeah.
there was a third part. The researchers wanted to make sure that this is really what was happening in the wild as well. So they went out and they actually took DNA samples of the anemone from both claws of boxer crabs. And what they found was that in each case, the anemone in each claw was a clone of the other one.
Awesome.
So the
Cool.
asexual propagation seen in the lab also happens in the wild, and is likely how all the crabs in the wild end up with their own anemone pom-poms. So I think it's probably safe to say that this relationship has certainly boosted the population of these particular species of anemone. And while I was really initially thinking the story would just be about the boxer crabs, as I started to research it more, I realized that it's really a story about these 2 species that are in this mutualistic relationship, and both are interesting on their own, but together they're just so fantastic and strange. I will point out one last thing, though, that while the anemone can live on their own, the crabs cannot live without the anemone.
Okay.
So it's not a completely two-way street in that way. But it is super cool, and my sources this week for this was the research paper in the journal Peer. And the paper was called Boxer Crabs Induce Asexual Reproduction of Their Associated Sea Anemones by Splitting and Intraspecific Theft. And then some general information came from Wikipedia.
Very cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Kirk.
We're going to go to a break, and when we get back, we will have Rachel.
Yay! Welcome back, everyone. So super exciting note, as we get started, I actually did my math wrong and forgot that we actually have 5 Wednesdays this June, so I could do 5 rainbowy topics, and which is super exciting.
Ooh.
But that,
Ooh.
it's so fun. But I meant to end this, end Pride celebration with this particular creature, but I'm just going to go for it because it's wonderful, and I cannot believe we have not covered this. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
It's one of those things that we're going to probably cover again because I'm going to focus in on one particular little subset, and we're going to have to go back in because this week I'm covering chameleons.
Nice.
How have we not covered chameleons?
I don't know.
It's a big,
That's
strange
true.
world. That's how.
So as of June 2015, there are 202 distinct species of chameleon. And there is no way that I can cover all of those. So I'm leaving that door open. So I'm going to focus on what make chameleons chameleons, but I'm also going to mostly focus in on their coloration, which is how we
Great.
really know
Let's
them.
do it.
So just a little background. Chameleons are old world lizards, which pretty much means that they're of more African origin than of the Americas. I say more African origin. They're from Africa. But they have been introduced to like Hawaii, California, and another state that is eclipsing my brain.
Florida.
That's it. Florida. How could I forget Florida? They are a
It happens.
subgroup of iguanas. So they're part of like the same kind of family of iguanas. They're just generally smaller. But they have quite a wide range of species and coloration. They have a wide variety of really cool adaptations from their prehensile tail that some species use as a pretty much a fifth limb. They have the zygodactyl hands that allow them to move and grip onto either side of a branch as they move. They got their eyeballs that move in
so
different
wild.
directions to be able to see. But I'm going to focus just a little bit more on their just amazing camouflage abilities. Okay. So, like I said, there's 200 species.
Oh, yeah.
Over 200 species. So obviously there's a wide variety of types. Some chameleons are actually more brown, because some live in the rainforests and others live in the deserts. If they live in the deserts, they're going to be more brown, and they just are able to shift the shades of brown depending on the light. And oftentimes that coloration change is actually to help the animal either warm up or cool down. They are reptiles, so they are ectotherms, which means that they get their body heat from the surrounding area. So being able to actually warm themselves up or cool themselves down is, especially in a desert, is amazing. They also use these color shades to communicate with other chameleons, to either attract potential mates or to even warn enemies. But the biggest thing that I was wondering was just how exactly they end up, why the species that are so colorful, why they're able to just produce these sheer amounts of colors and be able to change as quickly as they do. So the first thing is that the outer layer of their skin is see-through.
Oh.
So it doesn't hold any of the pigments.
Interesting.
Beneath that are special cells that are just filled with pigment, which we all are more or less aware of because we have pigment too. When they're trying to display new colors, the brain sends a segment to make to a message to these cells, and it makes the cells get bigger or smaller, which allow for different colors to be released. And they mix with each other to create new skin tones. So this is all happening in this layer.
Now, when you say released, I mean, are the pigments actually mixed together, or we're just seeing like a TV where the different, like the dots are just bigger, and so we are visually combining them, or do they actually combine?
It depends on the species. They can actually mix together a TV.
Okay.
Yeah,
like
where it's more
pixels,
like
yeah.
pixels. But it really depends on the species. Right?
Wow.
So what they're trying to do, or what they do actually, is they are actively changing the response of those pigments, because inside of the layer of cells are is like super tiny little guanine crystals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that helps refract some of the light to help change the color of the skin as well. So it's the pigments are being released, and allows it changes the color of the crystal just a little bit, and it reflects the light off of the crystal and into this over the skin, which changes the color.
Whew,
It's very
that's wild.
So often we see them using it as camouflage to prevent from being eaten, as they are still a prey species, or to also hide themselves from insects that they are trying to eat. But they've also been shown to adjust the colors of camouflage. They're actually able to change their colors by the vision of the specific predator species that are threatening them.
Oh.
Whoa, so
Not all species.
like they
but
somehow
some, yeah.
So
like
some
if-
species of chameleon are able to change their color to, say, a frequency that they know that particular predator can't see as
Yeah.
well? Is that what you're saying? That is wild.
We're still trying to figure out how exactly they do that.
Yeah.
Because
don't
that's
say.
absolutely insane. Because how do they know what that particular species can or cannot see? How do you?
Well, I mean, trial and
Mostly.
error, but like through many generations. But how does that even get encoded into your DNA to
Right.
get passed
And
along?
then if you see the predator that is threatening you, you go in, you tell your cells, or you don't tell your cells, it's part of a different part of your brain, but your cells change so that way that particular predator isn't able to see you anymore. That's crazy.
wow,
Which is a type of camouflage that
that's
we
bonkers.
just
Yeah.
aren't even, we're not anywhere close. We're not anywhere close. So generally speaking, chameleons are also able to display different emotions and signals to other chameleons. And Kirk is becoming, he's posing a disappearing act.
Sorry, I just put a camouflage
front of
hat
us.
on while you were talking. Don't let me interrupt you.
But they do have some base coloration that they have depending on the state. Most of the time, we've been able to figure out like blue and green are more relaxed states.
Right.
But if they get really excited, or if they are like showing aggression, yellow, orange, and red tend to be more reflected.
Sure.
It's actually also been shown that they've been able to create a purple color, which is
Huh.
really fun.
Wow.
As I talked to, I said in an earlier episode, these are pigments, so it's not quite color wavelengths, but they have been able to mix red and blue pigments to refract and create the purple coloration, if they so need to. Yeah, it's wild, and there's so much that we're still learning and trying to figure out about chameleons, because truly it's just astounding. And I can't say enough about how amazing chameleons are. So that's what I have for you both today.
Yeah, they are
That's amazing.
just bizarre animals. Probably, I love when you read up on something like this and you realize that it's even weirder than you kind of suspected it was.
They're so weird. I knew they were bizarre. They have so many other adaptations that already make them weird, but you get into their coloration and it's just like, hold on, what? That's insane,
Awesome.
Yeah. So a couple of websites that I used for just trying to wrap my head around all of this was Wikipedia was really helpful, as well as the San Diego Zoo, and National Geographic was also super helpful in trying to wrap my brain around all of that information. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for another colorful topic. You got one more, you
Indeed,
said?
thank you so much.
Okay. I have one more. Yeah. One
All
more.
right.
Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.